The Dragonback Series by Timothy Zahn. Book 6 Dragon and Liberator. Chapter 4. She waited for a grand total of maybe 2 minutes. Then, being careful not to make any noise, she set out to explore the office. The last time she'd been in here, when Frost had had her break into Neverland's desk safe, he'd kept her in the main room. Her first task, therefore, was to see what was beyond the side door. There were, as it turned out, 2 other rooms in the suite. One was a private washroom, the other a secure communications nook with a direct link to the ship's radio and interworld transmitters. There were, unfortunately, no exits from either room. She got a drink of water from the washroom and then returned to the main office, a fresh idea occurring to her. It was right after she'd opened this particular safe that Frost had fulfilled his part of their bargain and given her the satchel she'd gotten from Virgil Morgan's semi-line lockbox. More important, that was the point where Frost's interest in the Advocatus Diaboli's various safes had suddenly stopped. Something in that safe had apparently been very interesting to Neverland's ally. It might be worthwhile to see what that something was. She'd already opened the safe once, which theoretically meant she already had the combination. There was always the chance that Neverland had changed it since then. Anyway, it wasn't as if she didn't have a few minutes to spare. Pulling out her burglar's tools, she got to work. It was just as well she'd checked. Neverland had indeed changed the combination. Using her Mixstar computer to track down the new sequence, she got the safe open. Inside was a 2-inch thick stack of papers, plus half a dozen data tubes. Setting the data tubes aside, knowing they were probably encrypted, Allison pulled out the papers and set them on her lap. With her light clipped to her shirt collar, she started going through them, wondering which one had caught Frost's attention. 5 pages from the top, she found it. She'd finished looking at the papers and was going through the desk's drawers when Tanim returned.
The ship is very quiet,
the Khadaz said after Allison had helped her back through the opening.
I saw only 2 humans seated in the main control rooms.
The bridge, Allison identified it. Probably Neverland's night shift crew. Any passengers out and about?
The ducts carry the smell of many brumgas,
Tanim said, a brief shiver running through her.
I think there are also a few other humans.
Frost and some of his men, Allison said. At least now we know where we stand, which is more than Frost can say right now.
What do you mean?
I mean, I found out why he was almost on my side for a while during our little vacation on Brummagem. Allison held up the interesting paper she'd found. I helped him find out that Neverland's trying to do an end run around him.
What's an end run?
Actually, in this case, it's more of a double cross, Allison said. Remember that we figured out earlier how Neverland was going to get the ships he needed for his attack? That Frost was going to steal them from one of the planets where the Malison Ring is fighting one of their wars?
Yes,
Tanim said.
Only it was you who figured that out, not us.
Oh, Allison said, momentarily thrown off track. Yes, I suppose it was. But it doesn't really matter who came up with the idea.
Yes, it does,
Tanim said a bit primly.
Dracos says a person must always give proper credit for cleverness and resourceful thinking, especially if that same person is equally quick to assign blame.
Allison grimaced. Let me guess. Jack was grousing again about me opening the other safe for Neverland?
Actually, at the time, I believe they were discussing your plan for getting through Frost's security cordon into the Chakuk hangar back at the Penance spaceport,
Tanim said.
Jack thought your Trojan horse idea was very clever.
Allison felt her eyebrows crawling up her forehead. Jack actually paid me a compliment?
And Dracos agreed.
Tanim twitched her tail.
Is that so hard to believe?
From Dracos, no, Allison said. From Jack, yes. But never mind that. She tapped the paper. The point is that Neverland has contracted with the Comfern Company to buy a dozen surplus KK-29 system patrol ships.
Those are fighting craft?
Very much so, Allison said. Probably not as powerful as the ships Frost could get from a Malison Ring base, but they'll be plenty good enough.
Dracos has told me that the refugee ships are well armed.
Which won't matter a twig against the Valaga's death weapon, will it? Allison countered. Which is why Neverland can get away with a relatively small attack force. All he needs is to keep the defenders busy while the ships carrying the death slip inside the perimeter and start killing everyone. Tanim's eyes flicked around the room.
Do you think any of the death weapons might be aboard this ship?
I'd sure keep one close at hand if I was Neverland, Allison said. You didn't happen to smell anything besides humans and Brumgas, did you?
I don't think so,
Tanim said.
But there were cooking aromas that might have disguised other scents.
And of course, you don't know what a Valaga smells like, Allison pointed out. Well, we can look into that later. In the meantime, we've got work to do.
Finding a way out of here?
Actually, that shouldn't be a problem, Allison assured her. I was referring to the need to share this little news flash with Jack and Dracos.
How do we do that?
You'll see. Putting the papers and data tubes back in the safe, Allison resealed the door. Come on, the link's in the other room. The Advocatus Diaboli's interworld transmitter, she found as she settled into the Nook's comfortable armchair, was already set on standby. Either someone had been sending or receiving messages earlier, or else someone was planning to do so in the near future. Either could mean there was someone paying attention to the bridge's interworld control system. If so, that someone might notice a transmission coming from a supposedly empty office and wonder about it. They'd just have to risk that. The longer she and Tanim sat here in Neverland's office, the greater the chance someone would accidentally stumble over them. It was the work of only a minute to key in the SNA's own interworld frequency and pattern information. Mentally crossing her fingers, she tapped the microphone switch. Jack, she called softly. Come on, kiddo, look alive.
Allison?
Uncle Verge's voice came back.
This is a relief, Lash. Where are you, huh?
Aboard the Advocatus Diaboli, Allison said. And we don't really have time for chit-chat.
Understood.
Uncle Verge said.
First things first. Did you get the rendezvous location?
I have the data diamonds, Allison said. Unfortunately, the Kadar reader Jack brought back from the Haven Seeker is still on your side of the universe.
Neverland must have one of his own.
Which isn't anywhere in his office, Allison said. Either it's in one of the other shipboard safes or else he's carrying it with him. I'll try to get my hands on it, but I'm not too hopeful. Uncle Verge muttered something under his breath.
In other words, we've got to find a way to get you out of there.
You don't have to sound so unhappy about it, Allison said archly. But that's not why I called. Tell Jack to haul his carcass out of bed. I need to talk to him.
Jack's not here,
Uncle Verge said grimly.
He wrecked his car getting back to my part of the spaceport.
Tanim gave a little gasp, her breath briefly warming the back of Allison's neck. Are they all right? Allison asked.
They're fine,
Uncle Verge said.
But before they could get away from the scene, Jack was arrested for car theft.
Allison wrinkled her nose in disgust. She'd begged Jack to simply buy the stupid vehicle in the first place and be done with it. But he'd said that would be too expensive and that the paperwork would take too long anyway. She should have argued harder. Too late now. Can you get him out?
I can't exactly show up at the jail with bail money,
Uncle Verge said huffily.
And he hasn't tried to contact me.
Probably doesn't have enough privacy to get to his spare comm clip, Allison said. I guess he and Dracos will have to figure it out on their own. In the meantime, take a message for me. She relayed the information about Neverland's private collection of patrol ships. I don't know when he's planning to send crews to pick them up, she finished. But if Jack can get to the depot on Braintree before that, maybe he can do something.
Such as?
Such as making sure Neverland doesn't get them, Allison said patiently. Now that the Malison ring has been alerted to the fact that something fishy is going on with Frost, he shouldn't be able to just waltz into one of their bases and commandeer a large number of their ships. If we can also deep six these KK-29s, Neverland should find himself in a bind.
He'll still have the Velaga and their weapons, yeah.
Sure, but the fewer ships he has to throw at the refugee fleet, the better the chances the Kada and Shantine will be able to paste all of them before they get close enough to use the death.
I don't know, Uncle Verge said doubtfully. I'm thinking about the 300 Brumgas Neverland's already shipped off of Brummerdam, yeah. Even fully crewed, a dozen KK-29s wouldn't carry more than 72 of them. Either he's very confident that Frost can grab more ships, or else he's got those extra ships already stashed away somewhere, yeah.
We do know he's got several Jin 90s, Allison pointed out.
Which are single-seat fighters, Uncle Verge countered. Three-seaters if you throw in the optional gunner and observer. He can't have enough of those to need 300 Brumgas, yeah?
Allison scratched her cheek. Unfortunately, he had a point. I'll see what I can find out about that, she said. In the meantime, you and Jack see what you can do about those KK-29s, all right?
I'll give him the message,
Uncle Verge said heavily.
Provided he gets out of jail before they fly.
If he doesn't, Tanim and I will just have to deal with them, Allison said. I've got to go. Don't try to call me here.
Thanks. I had figured that part out, yeah?
Uncle Verge said sardonically.
Take care of yourself, Lash. You and Tanim, huh?
I will. Good luck. She keyed off the microphone.
Do you truly believe you and I can handle all this by ourselves?
Tanim asked. What, you mean that thing at the end? Allison asked. No, of course not. That was just for Jack's benefit. Sometimes the best way to get someone on the job is to hint that he can't do it.
That seems rather... I don't know the word.
Allison sighed. The word is cynical, she said, or maybe manipulative.
You can change,
Tanim reminded her quietly.
All people have that capability.
I know. Reaching down, Allison scratched Tanim briefly behind her ears. But to tell you the truth, I kind of like myself just the way I am. Go back out to the main office and listen at the door, will you, while I close down here? Tanim nodded and trotted back out of the nook. Allison leaned over to close the door between them, then quickly reset the transmitter's frequency. The man waiting at the other end of the connection picked up instantly. With the word manipulative still running through her mind, Allison launched into the report she hadn't wanted Tanim to hear. Fortunately, this one was much shorter than the conversation with Uncle Verge. Within a minute, she was finished and had signed off. Resetting the controls to their original positions, she rejoined Tanim in the main office. The Kada was by the door, her ear leaned against it. Any change? Allison called softly as she sat down at Neverland's desk. Tanim shook her head as she moved away from the door.
Both guards are still there, she said, coming to Allison's side. You have a plan?
I do, Allison said as she keyed on the desk computer terminal. The system was code-locked, of course, but Allison had her own version of Jack's sewer rat technique to get into uncooperative computers. The trick with military organizations like this is to know how things get done, she continued. The key is that every order goes through at least 2 levels of command before it gets to where it's supposed to go.
Even in a group this small?
Even here, Allison assured her. The mole program did its work and the menu came up. Scrolling down the assignment roster, she found the 2 guards currently standing outside the office door were a human named Rennie and a Brumgun named Grisful. What I'm doing now is issuing a new set of orders to the night duty officer, she explained as she typed. I'm telling him to send our guards out there to the main conference room for a brief consultation with Colonel Frost. Tanim was silent a moment.
But surely they'll quickly discover the orders are false.
Of course they will, Allison said, but they won't be able to trace which of the ship's computers sent the message. She smiled grimly as she added a second order to the list. And you might be surprised how easily suspicious minds like Neverland's and Frost can be nudged in the wrong direction. She logged both orders and shut down the computer. Come on board, she said, holding out her hand. One last job and we'll be ready to go. Selecting the largest and longest range needle transmitter from her sewing kit, she slid it into the carpet beside one of the desk legs, out of the normal traffic pattern, the way her father had taught her. The carpet wasn't thick enough to hide the needle completely, but no one was likely to see it unless he was specifically looking for it. Then, making sure she hadn't left behind any other trace of her presence, she stepped to the door and set her burglar's pickup microphone against the panel. Frost's mercenaries were nothing if not efficient. Barely 2 minutes later, she heard a faint comm clip voice from outside the office. There was a short, half-hearted conversation, followed by a quiet order to the guard's companion, followed by the sound of 2 sets of footsteps moving away down the corridor.
Is that it?
Tanim murmured from Allison's shoulder when the footsteps had faded into silence. That's it, Allison said. Steeling herself, she opened the door. She'd half expected to discover that the trick had failed, that she would find herself facing men in brumgas with drawn weapons and evil grins. But the corridor was deserted. Getting her bearings, she headed forward.
Where are we going?
Tanim whispered. You'll see, Allison whispered back. Another corridor cut across theirs directly ahead. She paused to check around the corner, then turned into the cross corridor and headed outward toward the ship's hull. A minute later, they reached their destination.
What is this?
Tanim asked, lifting her head from Allison's shoulder to study the red-rimmed door in front of them. One of the ship's life pods, Allison said, running a finger across the thin, multicolored seal pasted across the edge of the door. 2 weeks' worth of food and water and air for 4 people. Perfect place to hide until we reach the rendezvous. Tanim seemed to digest that.
And the catch?
Allison lifted her eyebrows at her symbiont as she pulled a small coil of nearly invisible but incredibly strong microfilament thread from her shirt cuff. The catch? Tanim shrugged, a sideways flip of her crest.
Jack says that when something looks too good or too easy, there's always a catch.
Talk about cynical, Allison commented, taking the cap off her pen and carefully setting the loops at the ends of the monofilament into small grooves in both cap and pen.
Is he wrong?
In this case, no, Allison said. Setting the pen and cap on the deck, she pulled out a pair of thumb caps and worked them onto the tips of her thumbs. See this seal? It's designed to break easily so that people can get into the life pod in an emergency. But once it's broken, it's broken.
Showing that someone has been inside?
Exactly, Allison said. It's supposed to discourage people from sneaking inside and pilfering any of the goodies.
But you have a way to repair it?
Not exactly. Picking up the monofilament again, Allison gripped the pen and cap in opposite hands and set the thread against the door by the end of the seal. Pressing the thread firmly against the metal with her protected thumbs, she eased the thread beneath the seal. The plan is to get the seal off but keep it intact. It was a technique she'd practiced many times under her father's watchful eye, but she never had to do it in the field, and rather to her surprise, she discovered it actually worked. The monofilament slid smoothly beneath the seal, cutting through its adhesive and releasing it from the metal. Her biggest fear was that the seal would simply fold itself back onto the door as the thread passed beneath it. Fortunately, that didn't happen. Instead, the seal curled slightly away from the metal as she worked, eliminating that danger. A minute later, she was finished. Praying that Neverland hadn't added any entry alarms, she touched the release. He hadn't. The door slid open, the pod's lights came on, and she slipped inside.
Are we going to close the door?
Tanim prompted, peering out Allison's shirt back into the ship. Patience, Allison said, pulling out her multi-tool and getting to work on the control panel plate beside the door. Closing the door normally starts a 10-second ejection countdown.
Oh.
Oh, indeed, Allison said. We'd really like to keep that from happening, especially since I'm not sure what happens to a life pod ejected while the ship is still running on the Echo star drive.
But you can keep that from happening,
Allison grimaced. We'll find out in a minute. The plate came off. Nudging the bundle of wires out of the way with her screwdriver, she located the right one and popped the end out of its socket. That should do it, she said, tapping the door control. She watched the status display carefully as the door slid shut, counting down the seconds to herself. 15 of them later, she finally started breathing again. Yes, she said, closing the multi-tool. That did it.
Not quite,
Tanim said.
Would you press your back against the door a moment?
Frowning, Allison complied. Tanim shifted around on her back, probably checking the corridor one last time. But no, something else was happening, something that felt subtly different from anything else Allison had experienced with her companion. She squeezed her hand into a fist, a fresh wave of tension flowing into her. If Tanim fell off into the corridor, this whole thing would have been for nothing. And then, to her relief, she felt the Kadaw's weight shift again as she came back fully onto Allison's skin.
There!
Tanim said with satisfaction.
I've smoothed the seal back into place on the door.
Allison blinked. How in the world did you do that?
I leaned over the wall as if preparing to fall to the other side.
Tanim said.
Only instead, I merely leaned one paw over and pressed it against the seal.
I'll be buggered, Allison said, eyeing the Kadar with new respect. That's a new one on me. As a matter of fact, I don't think even Dracos has tried that one. Nicely done.
Thank you,
Tanim said.
I was afraid it would be seen.
It might have at that, Allison agreed. In actual fact, she knew, the flowing air currents out there would eventually have reattached the seal more or less where it was supposed to be. But Tanim was so proud of her accomplishment that Allison had no intention of popping her bubble. Besides, this way the seal was back in place that much sooner.
I'm glad I could help,
Tanim said.
What now?
Now the evening is finally over, Allison yawned widely. I don't know about you, but I'm beat. Let's check out that food supply and then see about getting some sleep.